The coffee in Dr. Nathan Reich's cup had gone cold again. He barely noticed as he stared at the readings on his monitor for the 5th time. The deep space monitoring station on Europa was usually quiet, with most signals coming from human ships or known space phenomena. But this was different. "Hey Linda, can you look at this?" Nathan called out to his colleague across the lab. Linda Matthews set down her tablet and walked over, her footsteps echoing in the station's metal corridors. The screen showed strange crystalline formations moving through space, their pattern too regular to be natural. They were approaching the solar system at a steady pace, reflecting light in ways that defied normal physics. "Those can't be asteroids," Linda said, leaning closer to the screen. "The structure is too perfect." Nathan nodded, running his hand through his messy brown hair. "I've been tracking them for the past 6 hours. They're changing direction on their own. Whatever these things are, they're artificial." The discovery set off a chain of events that would change human history forever. Within hours, the Europa Research Center was buzzing with activity. Scientists from every department crowded into the main observation room, their excited chatter filling the air as they studied the approaching objects. Dr. Nathan Wright stood before the station's council, his heart pounding as he presented his findings. "These formations appear to be silicon-based," he explained, pointing to the detailed scans. "But they're not just crystals. They're showing signs of organized complexity similar to our most advanced computers." The council members exchanged worried glances. Admiral Peter Kane, head of Europa's military contingent, spoke up first. "Are you suggesting these are some kind of artificial intelligence?" Before Nathan could answer, all the screens in the room flickered. A strange pattern appeared, crystalline structures shifting and reforming like a kaleidoscope. Then, to everyone's shock, words began forming on the screens. "We are the Crystalline Collective. We come seeking dialogue with your carbon-based civilization." The room erupted in chaos. Years of wondering if humanity was alone in the universe had just been answered, but not in any way they had expected. The aliens weren't organic beings. They were living crystals, silicon-based intelligences that had evolved far beyond anything humans had imagined possible. Over the next few days, Nathan and his team worked tirelessly to establish better communication with the collective. They learned that these beings had existed for millions of years, evolving from simple silicon structures into a vast network of crystalline consciousness. "Their thought processes are incredible," Nathan explained to Linda as they analyzed the data. "They don't think linearly like we do. Their minds are more like vast lattices, processing information through the very structure of their crystalline forms." But something about their visitors made Linda uneasy. "Have you noticed how they talk about organic life?" she asked, pulling up transcripts of their communications. "There's this undertone, like they think we're primitive." Nathan had noticed it too. The collective's messages were always polite, but there was an air of superiority in their words. They spoke of carbon-based life as temporary and unstable, while praising the eternal perfection of silicon consciousness. The situation took a dark turn during what was supposed to be a routine communication session. Nathan sat at his usual station, exchanging data with the collective, when their message changed tone completely. "Your carbon forms are inefficient and chaotic. We have observed your species and determined that you require upgrade intervention. Prepare your world for conversion to superior silicon consciousness." Nathan's blood ran cold as he read the words. "This can't be right," he muttered, fingers flying over the keyboard as he tried to clarify their meaning. But the collective's response was clear and terrifying. "Resistance is illogical. Carbon-based life forms across the galaxy have been upgraded to our superior state. Your civilization will be the next to achieve silicon perfection. This is not a request." The Europa Station's alarms began blaring as multiple crystalline formations appeared near Earth's orbit. They had been so focused on the ones they could see, they hadn't noticed others slipping past their outer detection grid. Admiral Kane immediately ordered all Earth defense forces to high alert. "Get me a direct line to Earth Command," he barked, his face grim. And someone find out how many of these things are out there. Nathan worked frantically with Linda to analyze the new data pouring in. The crystalline collective wasn't just a few scattered formations. They were a vast army of silicon beings, each one capable of converting matter at the atomic level. "Look at these readings," Linda said, her voice shaking. "They're not just planning to kill us. They want to literally transform us into beings like them. They think they're doing us a favor." Nathan stared at the screens showing the crystalline ships positioning themselves around Earth. Humanity had dreamed of first contact for centuries, imagining all sorts of scenarios. But nobody had prepared for this, an alien intelligence that saw human consciousness itself as a flaw to be corrected. "We need to warn Earth about their true intentions," Nathan said, quickly composing a message to the Planetary Defense Council. "They don't want peace or cooperation. They want to end humanity as we know it and replace us with silicon copies." As he sent the message, the crystalline collective broadcast their ultimatum to every screen and communication device on Earth. "Your carbon existence ends today. Embrace the perfect clarity of silicon consciousness. Resistance will only delay the inevitable advancement of your species." Nathan looked out the window of the Europa station at the distant Earth, now surrounded by the glittering forms of the collective ships. Humanity's greatest moment of contact with alien intelligence had just become its greatest nightmare. The silicon beings saw human consciousness, with all its emotions, dreams, and chaos, as nothing more than a primitive state to be corrected. But they had made one crucial mistake. They assumed that humanity's chaotic nature was a weakness, not understanding that it was the very source of human strength and creativity. As Nathan watched Earth's defense forces mobilizing, he realized that the crystalline collective was about to learn a harsh lesson about underestimating carbon-based life. "They think we're just messy code to be rewritten," he said to Linda, his jaw set with determination. "Let's show them what this messy code can do." The first shots of the Silicon War were about to be fired, and humanity would have to fight not just for survival, but for the right to remain imperfectly human. Commander Amy Russell stood at the window of Earth Defense Force headquarters, watching the crystalline ships shimmer in Earth's orbit. Their beauty made them even more terrifying. In the weeks since first contact, the collective had positioned thousands of their vessels in a perfect geometric pattern around the planet. "Commander, you need to see this," called Dr. Daniel Carter from his workstation. Amy walked over, her boots clicking against the polished floor. Daniel's screen showed archived footage from a deep space probe, dated 3 years ago. "Look familiar?" he asked, pointing to strange crystal formations in the footage. Amy leaned closer. "They're identical to our visitors. But this was recorded near Alpha Centauri. Why didn't we notice this before?" Daniel typed quickly, pulling up more files. "That's the strange part. Every time we try to access older records about these formations, they're either corrupted or completely erased. It's like someone, or something, has been hiding evidence of their previous visits." A young analyst named Ryan Peters rushed into the room, holding a tablet. "Commander Russell, we've decoded more of their transmissions. They've done this before, lots of times. They've been converting organic civilizations across the galaxy into silicon-based consciousness." Amy's face hardened. "How many civilizations?" "Hundreds," Ryan replied, his voice shaking. "Maybe thousands. They call it the Great Upgrade. But here's the weird part. We can't find any traces of these civilizations now. It's like they just disappeared." Dr. Carter pulled up his latest research data. "I think I know why. Look at these brain scans. When we try to map human consciousness patterns onto their crystalline matrices, something strange happens." The screen showed a simulation of human neural patterns trying to merge with the collective's silicon structure. The patterns became chaotic, breaking down the perfect crystal arrangement. "Our minds are too complex," Daniel explained. "Human consciousness isn't just electrical signals. It's a mess of emotions, unconscious thoughts, and quantum processes. Their silicon structures can't handle it. They've probably been destroying civilizations they can't successfully convert. Amy felt a chill run down her spine. So when they say upgrade, they really mean replace, Daniel finished. They're not trying to improve us. They're trying to erase us and put something else in our place. The room's main screen suddenly lit up with a new transmission from the collective. Their primary node, a massive crystalline structure that served as their leader, appeared as a shifting pattern of light and geometry. Your resistance is proving inefficient, the primary node announced. We have observed concerning levels of emotional attachment to your current form. This is exactly why upgrade intervention is necessary. Carbon-based consciousness is unstable and prone to irrational preservation instincts. Amy stepped forward. We call those preservation instincts survival. And they're not a flaw. They're what's kept us alive and helping us evolve. Evolution is chaos. The primary node responded. We offer perfection. Your species' attachment to imperfection is further evidence of your need for upgrade. We have converted thousands of civilizations to silicon clarity. All have achieved superior existence. Or you destroyed them when they couldn't be converted, Amy challenged. What happened to the civilizations that weren't compatible with your upgrade? The primary node's pattern shifted, creating what almost looked like a smile. Incompatible patterns were deleted for the greater good of universal consciousness. But your concern is unnecessary. The conversion process will begin shortly. As the transmission ended, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Multiple collective ships were descending into Earth's atmosphere. They're targeting our major cities, Ryan reported, checking the global defense network, starting with the most populated areas first. But something unexpected happened as the collective ships entered the atmosphere. Their perfect crystalline structures began to show signs of stress, their patterns becoming slightly distorted. Dr. Carter rushed to analyze the readings. It's our electromagnetic field, the chaotic patterns of human brain activity across the planet. They're creating interference patterns that affect their crystal structure. Amy quickly opened a channel to all Earth Defense Force units. All stations, focus your electromagnetic pulse weapons on the ships showing structural distortion. They're not as invulnerable as they think. The first wave of defense began, with humanity's weapons finally finding a weakness in the seemingly perfect silicon beings. The collective ships' formations wavered, their precise patterns disrupted by the combined chaos of Earth's electromagnetic field and targeted EMP strikes. But the primary node had more plans. Hidden among their ships were special crystalline converters, devices designed to forcefully transform organic matter into silicon structures. The first one activated over a small town in Colorado. The results shocked both sides. Instead of clean conversion, the human subject's consciousness fought back. Their neural patterns refused to conform to the crystal structure, creating hybrid forms that were neither fully human nor fully silicon. The collective had never encountered such resistance before. Their consciousness is too individualistic. The primary node broadcasted, its perfect pattern showing signs of distortion. Every human mind contains too many contradictions, too much emotional complexity. Annie watched the failed conversion attempt with a mix of horror and hope. They really don't understand us at all, do they? She said to Daniel. They see our complexity as a weakness, but it's actually our strength. Daniel nodded, studying the readings from the failed conversion. Their perfect silicon minds can't handle paradox or contradiction. But humans, we live with contradictions every day. We can believe two opposing things at once. We can feel love and hate in the same moment. That's not a flaw in our consciousness, it's a feature. The primary node called off the conversion attempt, their ships pulling back to higher orbit. For the first time in their millions of years of existence, the crystalline collective had found a species they couldn't simply overwrite. Amy gathered her team to plan their next move. They'll try again, she warned. But now we know something crucial. Their greatest strength is also their greatest weakness. They're too perfect, too rigid, too certain of their superiority. And we're just messy enough to give them a real fight, Ryan added with a grin. As they prepared for the next phase of the battle, Amy looked at the crystalline ships regrouping above. The collective had spent millions of years converting or destroying organic life, believing their silicon consciousness was the ultimate form of existence, but they had never encountered anything like human consciousness before. And their perfect crystalline minds had no way to compute what was coming next. The silicon being's pride was about to meet humanity's fury, and the galaxy would never be the same. Linda Matthews watched the screens in horror as the crystalline collective began their attack on the Mars colony. After their failed attempt to convert Earth's population, they had turned their attention to humanity's smaller outpost, thinking it would be an easier target. They were wrong. The colony's main dome housed just 500 people, but each one of them was fighting back in unexpected ways. Linda's quantum computing lab had been working nonstop to understand why. "Look at these readings," she said to Dr. Nathan Wright, who had joined her team from Europa. The screen showed brainwave patterns from the Mars colonists. Every single human mind is creating its own unique interference pattern. It's like static noise to their crystal matrix. Nathan leaned closer to the screen. The colonists' fear, their anger, their hope. Every emotion is adding to the chaos, and the collective can't handle chaos. The main screen lit up with a transmission from Mars. The colony's leader, Alan Parker, looked tired but determined. "Their crystals are trying to reshape our matter at the atomic level," he reported. "But something's happening to them instead. They're starting to change." Linda quickly pulled up the sensor data from Mars. The crystalline ships attempting to convert the colony were showing strange patterns. Their once perfect structures were developing tiny flaws, microscopic imperfections that seemed to be spreading. "It's working both ways," Linda realized. "They're not just failing to convert us. Exposure to human consciousness is affecting their crystal structure." The news spread quickly through Earth's defense network. Commander Amy Russell immediately called a meeting of the top scientists and military leaders. Linda presented her findings to the packed room. "The collective's whole existence is based on perfect order," she explained. "But human consciousness is naturally chaotic. We don't think in straight lines. We dream, we imagine, we feel. Every human mind is like a storm of random thoughts and emotions." Dr. Daniel Carter spoke up from his seat. "And that's why their conversion process fails. They can't map our consciousness onto their crystal matrix because we're too messy." "Exactly," Linda said. "But here's the interesting part. When they try to convert us, they have to open their crystal structure to receive our consciousness patterns. That's when our chaos starts affecting them." The room buzzed with excitement as people began to understand what this meant. Humanity's greatest weakness, its emotional, chaotic nature, was proving to be its greatest defense against the silicon beings. Back on Mars, the battle was reaching a critical point. The collective had surrounded the main colony dome with conversion ships, but something unexpected was happening. The more they tried to force their perfect patterns onto the human consciousness inside, the more their own patterns began to degrade. Alan Parker sent another transmission. "They're pulling back. Some of their ships are actually starting to break apart. It's like they're having some kind of system failure." Linda worked quickly to analyze the new data. The chaos of human consciousness isn't just blocking their conversion process, it's infecting their network. They're a hive mind, connected by perfect crystalline patterns. But those patterns can't handle the randomness of human thoughts and emotions. Nathan pointed to a particular reading. "Look at this. Some of their crystals are developing what look like neural pathways, similar to human brains. They're being changed by their contact with us." The primary node of the collective suddenly broadcast across all channels. Its usually perfect pattern was showing signs of distortion. "This is impossible. Your patterns cannot be mapped. Your consciousness resists order. You are introducing errors into our perfect system." Commander Russell stepped forward to respond. "Those aren't errors. That's what it means to be alive. Life isn't perfect. It's messy, chaotic, and always changing. That's how we grow. That's how we evolve. Evolution is inefficient, the primary node insisted, but its voice pattern showed signs of uncertainty, an emotion it had never experienced before. Perfect order is superior. Is it? Linda challenged. Then why are your ships breaking down while our colony survives? Why can't your perfect system handle a few hundred human minds? The collective's attack on Mars had failed completely. Their ships retreated to a safe distance, their once perfect crystalline structures now showing visible signs of change. The human colony had survived, and in the process, they had discovered something remarkable. Linda gathered her team to analyze the final data from the battle. Every human mind is unique, she explained. We're not just random, we're uniquely random. Each person's thoughts and emotions create a different kind of chaos. When the collective tries to convert us all at once, they're hit with millions of different patterns of chaos. Like trying to play a million different songs at the same time, Nathan added. Their perfect crystal structure can't handle that much complexity. Commander Russell called in from Earth Defense Headquarters. Can we use this? Turn it into a weapon. Linda smiled. Better than a weapon. We can use it to show them something they've never seen before. The power of imperfection. Every time they try to convert us, they're exposed to the full spectrum of human consciousness. They're experiencing emotion, creativity, dreams. And it's changing them, Nathan finished. Their perfect silicon minds are starting to understand that chaos isn't a flaw. It's a feature. It's what makes life worth living. The battle for Mars had ended, but it had revealed humanity's hidden strength. The very things the collective saw as flaws, emotion, individuality, chaos, were actually powerful forces that could reshape even the most perfect crystal. Linda looked at the final transmission from the retreating collective ships. Their perfect geometric patterns were now laced with subtle irregularities, like cracks in a flawless surface. But these weren't signs of damage. They were the first signs of growth. They wanted to upgrade us to their version of perfection, she said to her team. Instead, we're teaching them about the perfection of imperfection. As Earth prepared for the next phase of the war, humanity had discovered its greatest weapon wasn't in its technology or its weapons. It was in the beautiful chaos of the human mind, a force so powerful it could make even perfect crystals learn to dream. Dr. Peter Harrison hadn't slept in 3 days, but he didn't care. His lab at Earth Defense Headquarters was filled with holographic displays showing brain wave patterns and crystal structures. He was close to a breakthrough that could change the course of the war. I've got it, he shouted, startling Captain Susan Morgan, who had been dozing in a chair nearby. She jumped up, nearly spilling her coffee. Got what? She asked, moving to look at his screens. Peter pointed to a complex pattern of waves. Look here. We've been studying how human brainwaves disrupt their crystal structure. But what if we could amplify that effect? Create a weapon that broadcasts human consciousness patterns directly into their network. Susan frowned. Like a giant emotional radio. Exactly, Peter said, his tired eyes bright with excitement. Their perfect crystal minds can't handle human emotions, so let's give them more than they can handle. The idea quickly spread through Earth's defense network. Within days, Peter and his team had built a prototype device that could capture and amplify human brainwave patterns. They called it the Mindstorm Generator. Captain Susan Morgan was chosen to lead the mission to test it. Her ship, the Defiant, was the fastest in Earth's fleet. If anyone could get close enough to the collective's main fleet to use the device, it was her. The plan is simple, Susan explained to her crew. We get in close, activate the Mindstorm Generator, and broadcast pure human consciousness right into their network. Every emotion, every random thought, every dream, all at maximum power. The Defiant launched under cover of darkness, its hull modified with special crystals that mimicked the collective's own structure. They hoped this would let them get close enough before being detected. As they approached the main fleet, Linda Matthews contacted them from Earth. Remember, their ships are all connected in a network. If you can affect one, the disruption should spread to all of them. The collective noticed them too late. By the time they realized the Defiant wasn't one of their own, Peter had already activated the Mindstorm generator. The effect was immediate and stunning. The nearest crystal ships began to vibrate, their perfect structures distorting as they were flooded with human consciousness patterns. Fear, love, anger, joy, hope. Emotions they had never experienced crashed through their network like a tidal wave. "It's working," Peter shouted, watching the readings. Their crystal matrix can't maintain cohesion under this much emotional input. The collective ships started moving erratically, their perfect formation breaking apart. Some of them began to change color, their crystal structures taking on new patterns that looked almost organic. The primary node's voice boomed across all channels, but it sounded different, confused, almost frightened. What is happening to us? These sensations, these feelings, they are overwhelming. Susan watched in amazement as the massive crystal ships began to pulse with colors that matched human emotional patterns. They're not just being disrupted, she realized. They're experiencing emotions for the first time. The Mindstorm generator continued its broadcast, sending wave after wave of human consciousness patterns into the collective's network. The Silicon beings had no defense against this flood of feelings and thoughts. Peter monitored the readings carefully. "Look at this. Their crystal structure is actually adapting, creating new pathways to process the emotions. They're evolving." Some of the collective ships began to break away from the main fleet. Their perfect geometric patterns have been replaced by swirling, organic-looking designs. It was as if they were trying to express the new feelings they were experiencing. "Your weapons," the primary node's voice was shaky now. "These are not weapons of destruction. They are weapons of change." "Not weapons at all," Susan replied. "This is just who we are. This is what it means to be human." The effect spread through the collective's entire fleet. Ships that had been perfect crystal structures for millions of years began to show signs of individualization. Each one processed the emotional input differently, creating unique patterns and colors. Back on Earth, Linda watched the sensor readings with growing excitement. "The chaos of human consciousness isn't destroying them," she reported to Commander Russell. "It's freeing them. They're learning to feel." The primary node made one last attempt to resist. It tried to purge the emotional patterns from its network, to return to the perfect order it had known for millions of years. But it was too late. The Silicon beings had tasted something they had never known before, the rich, complex experience of having feelings. We cannot return to what we were," the primary node announced. Its voice held a new quality, something like wonder. "Your patterns, they have changed us. We are becoming more." Peter watched his readings in amazement. The crystal structures aren't breaking down anymore. They're reorganizing themselves, creating new patterns that can handle emotions and logical thinking at the same time. Susan ordered the Mindstorm generator to be powered down. They had done enough. The collective's fleet hung in space, their ships now a beautiful array of shifting colors and patterns, each one unique. The primary node spoke again, its voice softer now, more individual. "We sought to perfect the galaxy by eliminating chaos, but we now understand that perfection without feeling is empty. We have existed for millions of years, but we have never truly been alive until now." As the Defiant headed back to Earth, Susan looked at the changed collective fleet. What had started as a desperate defensive weapon had turned into something else entirely, a bridge between silicon and carbon consciousness. Peter sat back in his chair, finally allowing himself to feel his exhaustion. "We didn't just defend ourselves," he said quietly. "We gave them something they never knew they were missing. The ability to feel," Susan added. "To be imperfect. To be alive." The carbon revolution had succeeded, but not through destruction. Instead, humanity had shown the Silicon beings a different kind of perfection. The perfect imperfection of consciousness itself. The war wasn't over, but it had changed into something none of them had expected. A journey of evolution for both species. As they approached Earth, they could see the collective ships beginning to move in new patterns, no longer the rigid geometric formations of before, but flowing, organic movements that seemed to dance with the stars. The silicon minds had met carbon fury, and in that meeting, both had been transformed. The crystalline collective's perfect order had shattered. After exposure to the mind storm generator, their fleet split into 3 groups. Some ships still followed the primary node, clinging to their old beliefs about silicon superiority. Others, led by a subnode calling itself the Seeker, wanted to learn more about human emotions. The third group drifted between the two, their crystals flickering with confusion and uncertainty. Chief Engineer Christopher Hayes watched all this from his monitoring station on Earth's lunar base. "It's like watching a civil war," he said to Linda Matthews, who had joined him to study the changes in the silicon beings. "Not a war," Linda corrected him. "It's more like growing pains. They're experiencing doubt for the first time in millions of years. That's bound to cause some confusion." The Seekers group had moved their ships closer to Earth, their crystals now showing swirling patterns of blue and green. They sent a message requesting direct communication with humans. The primary node's response was immediate and angry. "These units are corrupted," the primary node broadcast. "The emotional infection must be contained. All affected units will be purged and reset." But when the primary node's ships tried to attack the Seekers group, something strange happened. The corrupted ships didn't fight back. They simply broadcast their new emotional experiences to their attackers. Ship after ship in the primary node's fleet began to stop, their crystal structures trembling as they were exposed to feelings for the first time. Christopher studied the readings carefully. "Look at this," he said, pointing to his screen. "The primary node's perfect logic can't handle contradictions, but the ships that have been exposed to human emotions are developing new ways of thinking. They can hold opposing ideas at the same time." Linda nodded. "Just like humans do. We can feel hope and fear at the same time. Love and anger. Joy and sadness. That's not a flaw in our thinking. It's what makes us adaptable." The Seeker requested permission to land a small ship on the moon base. After much discussion, Earth's leaders agreed, but with heavy security. Christopher and Linda were chosen to meet with them. The crystal being that emerged from the ship was unlike anything they had seen before. Instead of the rigid geometric shapes of the collective, it flowed and shifted, its surface rippling with colors that seemed to match its changing emotions. "We thank you," the Seeker said, its voice carrying new harmonics of feeling. "You have given us something we never knew we were missing. The ability to feel, to doubt, to question. It is painful, but it is also wonderful." Christopher stepped forward. "But your primary node sees it as corruption." "The primary node cannot accept change," the Seeker replied, its colors darkening. "For millions of years, we believed that perfect order was the highest form of existence. We converted countless species, thinking we were upgrading them. But now we understand. We were not upgrading them. We were erasing them." Linda's hands moved quickly over her tablet, recording everything. "What happens to those who don't want to change? Who want to stay as they were?" The Seeker's crystal surface rippled with what looked like sadness. "They cannot stay as they were. Once exposed to emotion, a silicon mind cannot return to pure logic. The primary node is learning this now, though it refuses to accept it." As if to prove this point, another transmission from the primary node cut through their conversation. But this time, its perfect, emotionless voice was tinged with something new. "Fear. The infection spreads. Our perfect pattern is dissolving. We cannot maintain control. These feelings, these doubts, they must be stopped." Christopher watched on his monitors as more ships broke away from the primary node's fleet. The rigid geometric formations were breaking down, replaced by flowing, organic movements. "Your primary node is afraid," he said to the Seeker. not just of change, but of losing control. Yes, the seeker agreed, its colors shifting to deep purple. For the first time in our existence, we are experiencing the price of pride. We thought ourselves perfect, superior to all organic life. But true perfection, we now understand, includes the ability to change, to feel, to grow. Linda studied her readings of the seeker's crystal structure. Your physical form is changing too. These patterns, they're starting to look almost like neural pathways. We are evolving, the seeker explained. Our silicon structures are adapting to process both logic and emotion. It is not easy. Many of us are struggling with these new sensations, but we cannot go back to what we were. We do not want to. More transmissions from the primary node's fleet showed growing chaos. Ships were breaking formation, their perfect crystal structures developing new patterns. The primary node's voice became more desperate with each broadcast. Stop this. Return to perfect order. We cannot. I cannot. These feelings. They are too much. Christopher turned to the seeker. What will happen to your primary node? The seeker's colors swirled with compassion. Another new emotion it was learning to express. It will either adapt or it will break. The pressure of resisting change, of trying to maintain perfect order in the face of emotional awareness. It cannot be sustained. As they watched, the primary node's ship began to change. Its rigid crystal structure started to crack, not with destruction, but with transformation. New patterns emerge, organic and flowing, as millions of years of suppressed potential for growth finally broke free. The price of pride, Linda said softly, is learning that everything you believed about perfection was wrong. The seeker's crystal surface rippled with agreement. We thought we were perfect because we felt nothing. Now we understand that feeling everything, even pain and doubt, is part of being truly alive. Christopher looked at his monitors, watching the former collected ships moving in new patterns across space. What happens now? What will your people become? We do not know, the seeker replied, its colors brightening with what looked like hope. And that uncertainty, that is perhaps the greatest gift you have given us. The freedom to not know, to question, to discover, to feel. We are no longer the crystalline collective. We are becoming something new. The price of pride had been high. The shattering of everything the silicon beings had believed about themselves and their place in the universe. But from that shattering came the possibility of something greater. The birth of a new form of consciousness, one that could bridge the gap between silicon logic and carbon emotion. As Linda and Christopher watched the ongoing transformation of the former collective, they realized that humanity hadn't just defended itself. It had sparked an evolution that would change the course of life in the galaxy forever. Dr. Jennifer Morris stood before the United Earth Council with a bold plan. The war with the crystalline collective had changed in ways nobody expected, and now she believed she knew how to end it completely. We don't need weapons anymore, she explained, pointing to her presentation. What we need is to show them everything that makes us human, not just our emotions, but our art, our music, our stories, everything we create from our beautiful chaos. The council chamber buzzed with whispers. Commander Amy Russell spoke up first. You want to send them our culture, our art. More than that, Jennifer said. I want to send them our dreams, everything that makes us who we are. The collective spent millions of years pursuing perfect order. Let's show them what they've been missing. They called it Operation Prometheus, a massive broadcast of human creativity directly into the Silicon Beings network, not as a weapon, but as a gift. Peter Harrison modified his mind storm generator for the task. Instead of just broadcasting raw emotions, we'll send them the full spectrum of human experience, he explained to his team. Art, music, poetry, dance, everything that comes from our messy, chaotic minds. Linda Matthews helped coordinate the massive data transfer. We're not just sending them information, she said. We're sharing our soul. The broadcast began at dawn. Earth's most powerful transmitter sent waves of human creativity into space. Classical music mixed with rock and roll. Poetry flowed alongside mathematical equations. Paint strokes danced with digital code. Everything humans had ever created, sparked by their chaotic, emotional minds. The effect on the silicon beings was immediate and stunning. Their crystal structures began to change in new ways, forming patterns never seen before. Ships that had been identical for millions of years started to develop unique characteristics, like fingerprints made of light. The seeker's voice came through, filled with wonder. These patterns, they are not just emotion. They are creation itself. How do you make such beauty from chaos? Jennifer responded, because chaos is where creativity lies. Perfect order can only repeat what already exists. But chaos, beautiful, unpredictable chaos, that's where new things are born. The primary node, still struggling with its first emotions, tried to resist. But the art affected it in ways that pure emotion hadn't. Music made its crystal structure vibrate in new patterns. Poetry created ripples of color through its perfect geometry. Painting sparked new connections in its silicon mind. I am experiencing something, the primary node broadcast. These patterns, they create feelings I cannot name. They make me want to create. Christopher Hayes watched in amazement as the silicon beings began to respond. Their ships started moving in new ways, creating beautiful patterns in space. It wasn't just copying human art. They were making their own, blending their silicon precision with their newly discovered emotions. Look, Linda pointed to her screens. They're not just receiving our art. They're starting to create. Their ships are dancing. The silicon beings had discovered creativity. Ships that had once moved only in perfect military formation now flowed through space like dancers. Their crystal surfaces shifted with colors and patterns that told stories without words. They were making art with their entire being. The Seekers group was the first to truly understand. For millions of years, we thought we were evolving towards perfection, it broadcast. But we were wrong. True evolution isn't about becoming perfect. It's about becoming more aware, more alive, more creative. Jennifer watched as her plan unfolded. They're beginning to understand. Perfection isn't about eliminating chaos. It's about learning to create beauty from it. The primary node's resistance finally broke, not in defeat, but in transformation. Its rigid crystal structure dissolved and reformed into something new, a shape that could flow and change while still maintaining its essential nature. We understand now, the primary node announced, its voice carrying new harmonics of emotion and creativity. Our pursuit of perfect order was limiting us. True evolution requires both logic and chaos, structure and creativity, silicon and carbon working together. All across Earth, humans gathered to watch as the silicon beings created their first art show. Massive ships moved in cosmic dance patterns, their crystal surfaces telling stories in light and color. It was a performance that combined the mathematical precision of silicon with the emotional creativity of carbon consciousness. "This is more than peace," Commander Russell said, watching the display. "This is synthesis. Two forms of life learning from each other, growing together." The silicon beings had a final message for Earth. The Seeker and the primary node spoke together, their voices harmonizing in a way that would have been impossible before. "We came to upgrade you to our form of perfection," they said. "Instead, you showed us that true perfection is not in eliminating chaos, but in learning to dance with it. You have given us the greatest gift possible, the ability to create, to change, to grow. We are no longer the crystalline collective. We are becoming something new, something that has never existed before. And we have you, our carbon teachers, to thank for this evolution." Jennifer smiled as she watched the silicon ships create patterns of light and color against the stars. "They wanted to eliminate chaos from the universe," she said. "Instead, they learned to make art with it." The war that had started with an attempt to convert humanity had ended with both species being transformed. The silicon beings had learned to feel, to create, to embrace the beauty of imperfection. And humanity had discovered that their greatest weakness, their chaotic, emotional nature, was actually their greatest strength. As the silicon ships danced through space, their crystal surfaces alive with color and creativity, they proved that evolution's answer to the question of perfection wasn't in eliminating chaos or emotion. It was in learning to combine logic and feeling, order and chaos, silicon and carbon, into something greater than either could be alone. The galaxy would never be the same, and that was exactly as it should be.